Hey guys, welcome to another ride in the Strugglebus, where every wheel is an empty triangle. Today we're going to be getting back to what I set this channel up for, helping out our newer double-digit Q friends with a really exciting topic. Today, josekis. I mean, does it really get any better than talking about josekis? They're so elegant with their push and pull and their constant, I'm going to go get stronger. No, I'm going to get stronger. And I mean, they're just so, yeah, they really aren't that exciting, are they? I'm not even sure I can make this topic enjoyable. I'm going to try, but I make no promises. I mean, you could put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a, whoo, girl, you're looking mighty fine tonight. I like that Joseki tattoo. It really matches your quadruple chins really. Wait a second. You're a pig. You can't fool me. Where was I? Right. Josekis are boring. But if you don't know what they are and why they exist, you're going to be struggling more than this bus. So let's get you a good foundation on josekis and why they're important. Before we jump into this thing, I want to let you guys know, I don't intend on just regurgitating a bunch of josekis. That really just would be boring and really wouldn't be helpful for reasons I'll get into later in this video. So if you were worried that this was just going to be a huge snooze fest where I go over showing a bunch of josekis, this isn't going to be that. So let's start at the beginning. What is a joseki? A joseki is a known corner variation or pattern where both players get an equally good local result. And how do we know that the result is equal for both players? Well, because a bunch of pros and robotic overlords told us so. A better answer is that these things have been studied for hundreds of years, and the wisdom gained from that has been passed down. Also, robots. Before we dive into some examples, though, I want to go over two important things. The first is that most josekis assume that the rest of the board is otherwise empty except for the other corners being taken. They only deal with local positions after the variation. The state of the rest of the board might mean that the variation is in fact not equal for both players. The second thing is that many josekis assume that you know how to use influence, which is a pretty big ask for newer players. So there are some variations that are going to favor one player over the other because you just have no idea how to use the influence that you got from the variation. I'm looking at you, 3-3 invasion. Okay, with those confusing words out of the way, let's take a look at what's probably the first joseki that everybody learns. Let's go approach a 4-4 stone. So starting off, both players are going to take all four corners, and black decides, I want to go approach 4-4 stone. And so he does so with a knight's move approach here. White is going to choose to back off with a knight's move, and then black is going to slide into the corner. White's then going to defend his corner, and black's going to back off. So here, both players get a solid base and a handful of points. Both groups are nice and strong. They aren't going to be in any trouble. And white gets sente out of this, which makes sense since white already had a stone there. This is pretty exciting, huh? Another example of a joseki is here now when white approaches black's 3-4 stone. So white will approach like this, and black will attach under in an attempt to get strength. White will threaten that strength. Black will back off. White's now going to protect this cut that's here. Black backs off to secure his base, and then white jumps out to get his base. And so this is another example of both players getting an equal result. Black gets a nice secured corner, and white gets a nice potential here with some influence. Congrats! You now know two of the most common josekis in the game. And while I said I'm not going to be going over a bunch of josekis, which is true, I do want to show the basic josekis that everybody should know. For this, I'm just going to be going over 4-4 stones and 3-4 stones. So let's start with a 4-4 stone and look at some of the variations that we have. So we already saw one of them where the player approaches with a knight's move, and then the person with the 4-4 backs off a knight's move. Then white would slide in, threatening the corner. Black protects the corner, and white jumps back. Again, this is probably the first joseki that you've learned, if you've learned any. It's very common. It's nice and basic. It is secure, and it is pretty simple to remember. And again, black's going to get sente here because he had the stone in the corner. Another example where we have the same approach is black, instead of backing off, can choose to what we call kick the stone. And in this case, white is going to extend to get some strength. Black's going to back off again, and then white's going to extend out. So this gives black a potentially large corner, gives white a potentially large side. Neither group is as settled as the previous one, though. It's worth noting that for both players, the 3/3 spot is still open as well as both of these invasion points. So this one is less secure than the others, but is still considered Joseki. Another response that black can have to this is what's called a pincer, where he plays on the other side of the stone. And a lot of people see this, interpret this as an attack on the white stone, and it's not. This is just black saying, I'd rather have the lower right side than the corner. And so in this situation, the most common response for white is for him to just jump into the corner. And then black's going to block, and white's going to extend, and black's going to extend, and white's going to threaten to connect, black's going to block, connect, extend, and jump out. This one is certainly more complicated than the others. Again, not every Joseki is going to be simple, but this is an important one to know because this is going to happen a lot in your games. The next way to approach a 4/4 stone is just jumping into the 3/3, taking the corner. And of course, just like the other approach, there are a number of responses to this, but the main ones that I'm going to go over is when black blocks and white pushes, and then black's going to take the hane, white's going to take the hane, black's going to push, white's going to push, black's going to push, white's going to push, and black's going to push. And typically here, white would tanuki. So in this situation, white actually gets sente, even though black had the stone there. If black wants to keep sente, instead of that, he can choose this variation where he pushes one more time. And typically, white is either just going to jump here or push. And in this case, black's going to hane and white hanes. And in either situation, black gets sente. So if black wants sente, he's going to push here. If he wants to keep white low, then he's going to go here. One more common Joseki from this is when white hanes here, black can double hane. This one is a little more complicated, right? Because you can see there's multiple cutting points going on. Black does this when he wants the corner. And so white will atari here, black will connect, white will capture this stone, black forces the capture, and then goes and gets these two stones. So black retains the corner, but white gets this nice powerful shape on the outside and gets sente. So now let's take a look at some of the approaches for a 3/4 stone, which is the other common cornerstone that we'll see. So instead of the 4/4, we've got the 3/4. So we'll take a look at when white approaches high. And this one we already showed earlier in the video. Black will typically connect underneath, white will hane, black will come back, white will connect, black will fully secure the corner, and then white will jump here. And there are some options that can be done here. White can play low instead of high, but typically this is what we would expect to see. There are other variations with approaching high, but I really don't want to get into them because, again, I don't want to go over too many. And the other approach that we have for approaching a 3/4 stone is when you approach low. And I'm not going to go over any of these because, honestly, there are just too damn many, and a lot of them are fairly complicated. So that is the exact opposite of what I wanted to do with this video. But again, I just wanted to show the basic ones that you really should know. So why do we care so much about Josekis? Isn't it kind of boring to just play the same pattern over and over again? Well, we care about Josekis for a couple of reasons. The first and easiest to understand is that if you follow a Joseki, you at least know that you're going to get an okay position at the end of it. It is a Joseki after all. Even if it wasn't the right Joseki for the situation, you're not going to die, and you're unlikely to lose the game on the spot. If you botch a corner and die, though, the game's over before it even started. Another important thing that Josekis do for us is they give us a good idea of what a realistic outcome is for any variation. That's really important for situations when your opponent either chooses a variation that you don't know or just plays some wacky move. If you can still get a result that's similar to what you'd expect from a Joseki, then you know what to aim for. Another important reason to learn Josekis is that it really cuts down on the amount of reading you need to do. If you've put in the work to learn Joseki and understand what it's trying to do and what the moves do, then that's that many less moves you need to read during a game. I mean, Go is mentally fatiguing enough as it is. It would be that much harder if we had to read out every variation in every corner that we played. And I want to expand on that second part because this is something that frustrates a lot of people. You learn some Josekis and you have an okay understanding of them. You go and play and then your opponent doesn't follow Joseki. Now what do you do? Okay, looks like we got a game, so let's go. And so I'll just do my little typical 4-4-3-4. Looks like he's going to do something similar, so I'll go approach here, and he'll probably back off. And then I think I can come back, I can attach, but let's see what he ends up doing. But he'll probably bet. What the hell is that? What do I even do with that? Now what do? Is this move bad, or is it just a variation that you don't know? What to do in a specific situation is going to depend entirely on that specific situation. There's no easy answer of, oh, your opponent didn't follow Joseki, then just do this. I will offer this advice, though. If they responded with a move that you're not familiar with, but it doesn't really change or affect the moves that you planned on playing, go play the pattern that you know. Most likely, it'll be good enough. Sometimes, though, their move just crushes you and you get a terrible result, and or your corner dies. Something went wrong, and you just don't know what. If only you knew more Josekis. You should go study all the Josekis so that you know them, right? Then this will never happen again. No, just no, don't do that. Pretty much every strong player out there is going to tell you that studying Josekis is a waste of time. There are too many of them, and so many of them are just situational. Also, it's very unlikely that you're going to remember the odd ones when they pop up 3 months after you studied them. Also, just because you learned some unpopular Joseki doesn't mean that your opponent knows it. So you go and try that, and then they don't follow it. And then what do you do? So here's what I suggest you do. This is the method that I've been using for years, and I still use to this day. If you play a game and a corner goes really poorly, like you clearly made a mistake and the result was just bad, you can just tell that it was bad, but you have no idea what you were supposed to do. After the game, go and use one of the various Joseki tools. Find the variation that you tried and see where you went wrong. See where you should have played and then what options your opponent had at that point to continue the variation. And then you can see how to respond to those moves. OGS has a Joseki tool. Go Magic has a nice Joseki tool. Josekipedia is an entire website dedicated to our friend the Joseki. Find out which one you like and go there and figure out what went wrong in that specific variation. That way, next time, you'll still totally forget it because it's been 3 months since the last guy who played it against you. So then you review it again, so that next time, the castle will burn down, fall over, and then sink into the swamp. But the fourth time, you will totally get it right. Just like anything else, it'll take practice and exposure to that variation. But this is what I suggest doing. Don't just go study Josekis. It really isn't a good use of time. But do go learn the ones that you just messed up in your last game. Even if you forget for the next time that it comes up, it's at least one that you saw in a previous game, and it'll show up again, and eventually you will learn and understand it. I want this to be the biggest takeaway from this video. You're going to want to learn a large number of variations, and I really feel the best way to learn them is to do so while you're playing and as they show up organically. Then learn them as they start popping up in your games. The more variations you know, the more you can choose from when you approach or defend a corner. And while all Josekis are going to give an equal result for both players, the other stones in the board are going to have something to say about who actually made out and got more than the other player. Often you can choose a variation based on the board that will give you a better global outcome than your opponent. That, of course, requires you to know a good number of Josekis. And ideally, you're eventually going to want to understand what each move within a given Joseki is attempting to accomplish. If you have a good understanding of that, then you can be better informed on the decisions that you need to make when your opponent strays from the variations that you know. I want to end this video with something that's actually helpful and practical. I'm going to go over a few common missteps and blunders that can happen with some of the really common Josekis. Some of them aren't that big of a deal, but some of them are pretty important, so let's take a look at them. So the first one is when we have a 4/4 stone and we approach it. And so let's say black chooses to back off. And white is used to playing here, right? And then black will play here, and white will come back. But what happens if white plays out of order and plays this first? What should black do here? So in this situation, this is a slight misstep by white. Not a big deal, but it's something. And in this situation, black should actually kick. And the reason is when we kick this stone, we expect white to stand up here. But let's compare this result to the Joseki that we know when black kicks. So here, black has these 3 stones, and then white has the same 2 stones, but instead of a stone being here, it's now at J3 instead, which is a little over-concentrated, right? If black had kicked originally, white would stand up, and then black would come back, and then white would take his nice extension. But in our other result, white ended up playing closer and not getting as much as he could. Again, not a huge mistake, but it's something worth noting. A larger mistake is when black pincers here and white jumps in. So the joseki that I showed, black separates white, white goes up, and then black extends one more time. But with the other joseki, when white just went into the 3-3, things changed, and I had black hane here. And so sometimes people get a little confused, and they do this hane even when the pincer's there. But unfortunately, the pincer changes things. So in this case, if black hane's here, this is a mistake, because this f3 stone changes everything. So in this case, white should descend to threaten to connect up to here. Black's going to go, well, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to block. And now white cuts here. And unfortunately for black, one of these two groups is going to die. He gets to pick which, but he cannot save all those stones because f3 is there. So if black tries to save this, then black's 3 stones are dead. If instead black goes, well, I can't let those die, and he does this, now black's single stone here is dead. And so this is a pretty bad outcome for black, and this is why when black pincers, he needs to extend one more time to stop that cut, because it can do some bad things. The next two that I'm going to go over are a little more advanced, so I'm sorry, I lied a little bit. I guess this isn't all for newer players today, but let's take a look at them. So another option with the 3-3 I mentioned is black can do the double hane, right? And he does this when he wants the corner and doesn't mind giving white the outside, because white's going to Atari and capture this stone, and then white captures and black does this. White actually has a pretty tricky move here, and that is c2. And the reason why white plays this is, black's going to play here because otherwise he loses those 2 stones, and so this kills these. What this does is later in the game, not right now, but later in the game, white can play something like this to help invade here. So maybe, in a situation where the board kind of looks like this, we'll just say it looks like this, and this area might be difficult to invade normally. White being able to get a free move here is really nice, because if black does something like this, now all of a sudden this group's alive and these 3 stones are dead in the corner. So that's why white does this, is to set this up for later in the game. But it also has another fun little trick that goes with it. So after black plays here, white can choose to push out, and black naturally wants to hane. And then white can hane this, and black would naturally also want to be able to hane this. The problem is he can't. He should extend. But what happens if black does hane? Well, we start by playing here, which threatens to kill these 3 stones, which is pretty big. And so black's going to go, well, I can't let that happen. I need to block. And so then white Atari's this, and black goes, well, I can't let that get captured. That's just game over. And now black just lost the game. So again, this one's a little complicated, and you probably aren't going to see this joseki too often too early, this double hane. But it does start showing up a lot, again, when black wants to retain that corner. So just something to be mindful of. Again, these variations, with extending down to c2 and that cut, that's probably strong single-digit Q stuff, but I wanted to show it. So for the last example, I want to go over how we can botch a joseki and get a bad result. So again, it's important to understand what the moves are aiming for in josekis and what the expected result is. And I haven't gone over this joseki yet, but I'm going to right now, where we instead attach. This is a very, very common joseki right now. But the intricacies of it are a little trickier, which is why I didn't want to go over too much of it. But here, black is going to hane, white's going to hane, black's going to Atari, white's going to connect, black's going to connect, and then white's going to play here. I'm not going to go over the reason why all these moves are the way they are, but this is what we would typically expect from this joseki. But what we see a lot of in our reviews, and is a little frustrating, is people not understanding what this Joseki really is. And sometimes we'll see white do stuff like this, and then black gets to play here. And then, you know, we get something like this. But this isn't Joseki. This isn't the Joseki, and if you look this up on any of the Joseki tools, this isn't going to be there. And the reason is this is our expected outcome, where black really doesn't get very many points here, gets some influence, and white also does not get very many points here. And if you compare that to this, black gets a pretty big corner, and white doesn't really get that much. And the problem here was this move. This move missed the mark for what this Joseki is attempting to do. But this is something that can happen when you go attempt Josekis without really understanding what they are and what their outcomes are supposed to be. So that's why it's important to have a good understanding of the Josekis that you're choosing to play. So that's it. Just a little primer on Josekis. Now you can embrace them and love them for everything that they are and they aren't. Like a pig with lipstick. She ended up ghosting me, by the way. So typical. So go experiment and learn some new Josekis. The sooner you learn them, the sooner you'll have better control over the opening. Because really the opening pretty much just comes down to not making a big mistake. While you can certainly fall behind early in the game, even if you play a proper Joseki in all four corners, until you get into Don land, you really can't lose a game in the opening unless you blunder something. So learn how to not blunder corners, and Josekis are there to show you the way for that. For those of you who enjoy this style of how I present information for the game and are looking for reviews and or lessons, I am available. My information is listed below. Or if you just want to get back to the channel, it's a great way to do that as well. Otherwise, thank you for coming out for another ride in the Struggle Bus, where every wheel is an empty triangle. I'll see you guys next time.